right, we got another minute. I'll continue letting people in the room. All right, it's 12:45. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm really excited to moderate this one for Heather Caprette from Cleveland State University. And this is, of course, a hot button issue for all of us, as we all want to know how to make all of our stuff more accessible for our students. And it's not just for students that need accommodations, it's for everybody. And I've been wanting to, that's why I signed myself up to be the moderator for this one, because I want to see what Heather had to share. So Heather,
thank you,
the floor is
Chuck.
yours.
Okay, I just want to say good afternoon to my colleagues and friends in Ohio, and good morning to the folks on the West Coast, and thank you for sticking with us. Today I'm going to talk about creating accessible Word documents that meet Essential Standards 8.2 and 8.3 in the QM rubric. So Standard 8 in general focuses on accessibility and usability, and it asks that we use principles of universal design for learning and that the course reflects a commitment to accessibility. So this means providing the information in formats that people with different learning styles or abilities can access or interpret. Standard 8.2 asks that course design elements maximize usability by facilitating readability and minimizing distractions. So some of the ways that we can facilitate readability is to group similar content together and separate it out with headings to indicate the change of topic. So this is basic chunking of text into paragraphs. And heading styles should be consistent. You don't want to use rainbow colors for all your different headings. Try to stick with similar font faces and similar colors, and you'll have different sizes and weights for the different heading levels. Make good use of white space around your content, whether this is paragraphs or line spacing, like your line height you could set above 1. You could make it 1.5, or sometimes I make mine 1.2. This helps reduce eye fatigue for people who are sighted, but it can also help people with reading disabilities. And you want to stick with font styles that help with screen legibility. So sans serif fonts, those are the ones without the little tails and embellishments on them, are good for body text. And you could use Arial, Helvetica, Verdana, Open Sans is a good one, Roboto, Lato. If you use a serif font, Georgia is designed for low screen resolution, and Times New Roman is a good one. But you want to minimize the use of those serif fonts and maybe just use them for headings and stick with sans serif for the body. So at the top, I have a paragraph in Arial 12 point, and I believe the line spacing on that was 1.2, and it's all left justified, and it has a ragged right. So that has good readability and good legibility. At the bottom, I wanted you to see a contrasting situation. So I use Black Oak Standard font, which is kind of squashed vertically and then stretched horizontally. And I used full justification, which you shouldn't do because it creates rivers of white space that I outlined in red. And it's just not good for reading. Okay, so 8.2 asks that text has adequate contrast with the background. So I grabbed an example from a syllabus that I use in my word accessibility course, and we can see that there's some light green and light turquoise text in this example that is suspicious, and Word Accessibility Checker will catch this, but there's also a really nice little program called Color Contrast Analyzer, and it's free. It's made by the Pachilo Group, and you can download it from the web. You would just want to type in color as C-O-L-O-U-R. I think it's like the British version of it. Once you download it and install it, it's a little standalone application that floats over the top of your document. And it has eyedropper tools. So it has an eyedropper and you can sample the text color, and you can use the second eyedropper to sample your background color. And then at the lower right, it'll give you the contrast ratio, and it'll tell you, does that fail for regular text size, and does it fail for large text size? So regular text size would be anything that's 12 point or 11 point. Larger text size would be 14 point bold, or anything that's 18 point or larger, according to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So when I do my screen share, I'll demonstrate how to use this program. 8.2 asks that we don't use color alone to convey meaning. So it's really tempted for us as for people who are sighted to use red to indicate importance. So the author has used red to indicate when the modules are, the quizzes for the modules, and also the due dates for the assignments on the right. So what you can do to indicate importance for people who are colorblind, who might see red and green as a yellowish gray, is to use an asterisk in front of the text that has come to be known as a convention for denoting importance. If it's a sentence or so, you might write the word important and put a colon and then follow it up with the important sentence. So standard 8.3 asks that the course provides accessible text and image files, documents, LMS pages, and web pages that meet the needs of diverse learners. This means adding alternative text to our images that conveys the meaning within the context of the text around it. You shouldn't use images of text. Logos are okay. We know a lot of logos have text in them. You would just want to write the text that's in the logo in the alternative text for that image. And I'll show you how to do that in Word. So it involves right-clicking on the image and going to Alt Text, and you write your description in the description field here. Word does have artificial intelligence and that will generate all text for you, but you should always check it because it may not be accurate. This one was pretty close. It says a colorful bird perched on a tree branch. Now, if I was using this image in, say, a North American Birds Field Guide, I would want to put in there that it's a scarlet tanager perched on a tree branch. So always check your alt text. A nice thing about Word is that when you insert a graph or a bar chart, it will give you an accessible table to type in headers at the top and also the data that you're representing by your bars or your pie chart. You can also right-click on this and add alternative text to the chart. Screen readers will read about 150 characters of the alt text, and then it would be up to the screen reader user if they wanted to listen to more. So it's not a guaranteed thing that they'll do that. So you just want to make it as short as possible. If you don't want to put the data in a table, I strongly recommend doing it if you have it. You could put a longer description in the body of the document below the chart, or even link to a longer description on a web page somewhere, or possibly put it in an appendix or appendix at the end of the Word document. There's another thing about images, charts, word art, shapes, those types of things sit on a drawing layer in Word, and they float above the text layer. So they aren't necessarily read in order or in context with the page. So the screen reader would announce that there's an object there, and then it would be up to the screen reader user to do a keyboard sequence to figure out, to get to the alternative text for the object. A way around that is to click the text wrap button, which is this little gray arch that's to the right of my chart at the top with the horizontal blue lines, and set it to be in line with text. And alt text can vary according to the context. So with the image or the painting below, if it was used in an art class, you'd want to specify that the painting was painted by Vincent van Gogh. The style is post-impressionism, and it used dramatic brushstrokes, and that then describe that it's a field of poppies in the foreground, trees in the background, and dark skies behind that. For a history class, the red poppies are a symbol of remembrance for World War I. So maybe you would just change the alt text to explain that. Standard 8.3 says that we should use true tables in Word. Don't use images of tables, and don't use draw table. You'll insert the table under the insert menu. And you want to designate your header rows and your header column. So a good structured table in Word contains one header row at the top with no merged or split cells and no empty cells. And now in the newer versions of Word, it can designate a column header also. So to do that, we go under Table Design. And to the left, there's a little box for header row and a little box for first column for that situation, and that's good for rubrics. There's another way that you need to designate a table header row, and that is to simply right-click in a top cell of the table and go to Table Properties, and then go to the Row tab, and then check the box to repeat as a header row at the top of each page, and then you would click OK. So that programmatically sets those as headers to be read by a screen reader before the cell data beneath it. You always need to consider the read order of the text. So for a screen reader, it's going to read from top to bottom and left to right for English. So in this case, it would read the range for A, and then it would read the range for B, and then the range for C, and then it would go down to the second line and read the range for A minus, B, and D. So it's out of logical order, and that's because the author used tabbing to create these columns. So to fix this, you could write each range on its own line with a paragraph return, highlight all the text, and then go to Layout and go to the column tool and tell it to set it to 2 or 3 columns depending on how many you want. Another way is to simply put this in an accessible table with proper headings. So the table on the left here is a one-row table, and it actually contains a table within another table. This grading scale could be a separate table, as well as the assignments and how much they're worth. So a screen reader would read from assignments down to total, and then it would jump to 55% and read each percentage down to 100. It would jump to this blank cell and read blank, and then start with grading scale and read that. So we could set this assignment values up into its own evaluation methods table and use the headers assignment and value to specify what is in the cells below them. Document headings should be formatted with word styles. Don't use the bold or italicized button under the home ribbon. Make sure that you select the text that you want as a heading and pick a word style such as heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. So this is a hint. Don't use the bold or the I button in the home ribbon to stylize your headings. It doesn't set them up to be headings to a screen reader. It just sets them up to be visual headings for sighted people. So with your heading levels, you want to be consistent and follow heading level 1 with a heading level 2, and heading level 3 would always be preceded by heading level 2. Heading level 4 would be preceded by heading level 3. Don't skip heading levels. So you would never jump from a heading level 1 to a heading level 3. And if you stick with heading level 1 through heading level 6, that matches HTML tags for headings. You should avoid underlining your text unless it's for a link or navigation. Don't use it to denote importance or to make the text stand out. And this is part of standard 8.1, but it's very important too, and that's to use descriptive text for your links. This is because people who use screen readers will do keyboard sequences such as insert F7 to bring up a list of links on the page, and then they listen to the list to know where they want to go and to navigate faster. They do that with headings too. So you want the link text to explain to them exactly where that link is going to take them, such as to the student code of conduct. So even though Word will underline and turn your URL text into a link, you want to remove that link and create the descriptive text link instead. And you want to avoid click here or read more, things that when it read off, when taken out of context, would not make any sense to a person who is blind. Okay, so my next step is to screen share a syllabus that has some issues with it. And I have an accessible version of it also. Okay, so this is my problem syllabus that I use for my Word accessibility course. And what you can do in Word is go under the review ribbon and then check on check accessibility. And it brings up a little panel on the right, and it will tell you all the things that Word found wrong with it. So there's no alternative text on my banner image. I have a floating text box, which we'll learn how to get rid of and implement a style to simulate this visual appearance. It'll always tell you to check your reading order of your tables. So this table here for this rubric has merged cells and like dual level of header rows. I'm going to fix that later on here. And then there's another table here. It's asking us to check. And it's also recognized that there's some contrast issues, like with black text on a blue background and with light blue text on a white background and turquoise. So we'll go through those and I'll show you how to fix one of those. And something really important is it picked up there's no headings in this document. So again, I talked about not using the bold or the italicize in the home ribbon to create your headings, because that's just for somebody who's sighted. And you can even check this by going to the view ribbon and then checking the box next to navigation pane. And you can see there's no headings listed here on the left. Now, if I bring up an accessible document, you can see here on the left under my navigation pane, it lists all the headings and I can jump to those sections in the document. So the heading level 1 is the main topic and it's the furthest to the left in the list. And then jumping down, you see heading level 2. If I go to written assignments, that's a heading level 2, but I've made heading level 3s out of the assignment numbers and then jump back out to heading level 2. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to right click on my image and go to edit alt text. And I like to put the text that's in the banner if it fits, if it meets that 150 characters. So in this way, it conveys exactly what this image is conveying. And I'm going to set the text wrap to be in line with text, and therefore it should be read in the correct order on the document. So I'm going to take the main topic and turn it into a heading level 1. So if I go to my home ribbon and I go to this little tiny button that looks like a downward pointing arrow with a right angle bracket, click that to open up my styles, I can find the heading 1 in the styles list, click on it, and it's going to apply Word's default style. So if I don't like the blue or if I don't like the font, I can right click on heading 1, go to modify, and then change it to, say, my school's colors. and I can make it bold. I like Arial 16 point. If you go down to the format button at the lower left and pick paragraph, you can check the spacing before and after the heading and increase it or decrease it to fit what you would like. So you don't have to stick with words built-in styles. So course information would be the next heading level down, heading level 2. So I click on it, and then I'll right click on it and go to modify. I'm going to change it over to my CSU green. I'm going to change it to Arial 14 bold. I'm going to check my spacing before and after. If I want a little bit more space between it and the paragraph below it, I can bump that up and then click OK. So now anything that I highlight and then click on heading level 2, it sets it to be the very same style as the one above it. So it's similar to cascading style sheets that we have in web design. And so you can think of these styles as global, and if you change them in the styles pane, it's going to affect them all throughout the document. So course expectations, I'm going to set the heading 2, but it looks like there's some subheadings in here that I can set to heading level 3. And if I don't like heading level 3, I right click and select modify and pick my CSU green, bold. I want to stay consistent with my font, so I'll make it 12-point bold. And then responsibility would be another subheading. And professional dress code, heading 3. And then textbooks is a heading level 2 because it's the same importance as the course expectations and the other heading level 2s. I'll do general guidelines as heading 2. Suggestions for successful academic outcomes, heading 2. Threaded discussions, heading 2. So there's a lot of heading 2s in this document and just a few heading 3s. So written assignments could have subheadings also, like there's a description for assignment 1 and assignment 2. And assignment 3. And I will turn my course schedule into a heading 2. And then I think we've finally reached the end of this very long syllabus here for our headings. And you can see this nice structure of headings on the left under the navigation pane. And if you do this to your document, not only is it helping the people who use screen readers to navigate faster, but if you have a long document, like a chapter in a book or maybe a book or something that you're doing, I believe it's under references, you can turn this set of headings into a table of contents, which I won't do at this time because it's just a syllabus. Okay. So let me get my list out because I am following a list to make sure I cover everything. Okay, so if I jump down to course objectives, there is a list of objectives that is not styled as a list. So I'm going to go under home, and you could pick bullet or you could pick numbered list, whatever suits you for your purpose. And this way, if this document's converted to HTML or if it's converted to a PDF, it's going to contain a list tag and list items for each of these, rather than setting it up as individual paragraphs for each line. Okay, so down under grading scale, we have this illogical flow of text. So what I did in my accessible document for grading scale is to simply put it into a table. So I'll copy this table into the problem syllabus. And I just want to designate this top row as my headers. So I'm going to click in the top row, right click and go to table properties, select row, and check the box next to repeat as header row at the top of each page and click OK. So now that has set that as a header row for screen readers. But there's a new thing in the modern versions of Word where you go under table design and make sure that you check off header row for the header row. And I don't have a first column of headers here. It's just simply a header row, so I don't have to check that. So then I can delete this text that doesn't flow logically. And again, the author used red to make this stand out. So I'm going to put an asterisk in front of it. If I hit a space, it turns it into a dot, but you can backspace. Let me try this again. Maybe Word just won't. I was hoping it wouldn't change it. There we go. Making sure they're the same color. And then the asterisk is also in front of these lower grade ranges that are important to avoid. Evaluation methods reads in a logical order because it's flowing from top to bottom, left to right. And then under course expectations and responsibility, the underline on the CSU student conduct code is just stylistic, but we will turn that into a descriptive text link for this URL down here. And I'll just right click and copy that hyperlink. Select the descriptive text and then right click and say link, and then paste that URL into the address bar and click OK. So now that is a descriptive link that will tell a screen reader exactly where it's going to take that person. You want to avoid URL text links because those are hard for somebody to listen to if there's a lot of those, and make sure there's no click here's. Okay, let's see. Next of order is under textbooks. I deliberately put a textbook that is in French because if you have a mixed language document, you want to make sure that you set the proofing language to be that language so that a screen reader reads it back with the proper accent. So I go to language and set proofing language. This one happens to be set at French, France French, but if it was English, I could scroll through the list of languages and pick the version of French that it's supposed to be and click OK. And then that would be read back properly by a screen reader. So this blue background with this black text, it has a contrast issue, but it has another problem in that it's a floating text box. And even if I click the text wrap and set it to be in line with text, sometimes screen readers don't read these in the flow of the document where they're supposed to be read. So it's a good idea just avoid text boxes in general. There's a way to simulate them if you do some styling, and I set some styling on the intense quote style on the styles pane. So you can see there's a border pattern that I put in and some shading for the background. So if I right click on intense quote and go to modify and format, I can show you the border settings for this. You want to select box, and the color would be, I like black, and then you can select the weight of the border. And the options, you can set whatever padding you want between the text and the border. You can see how the preview changes as I change the values up here for the bottom. So I'll just leave them all the same at 10 point, and then I'll jump over to the shading tab, and if I change it to a light yellow, you'll see the effect of this change when I set it. Did you see how that yellow went to a lighter yellow for threaded discussions? So that affected the change of that. So what I'm going to do is highlight all that black text against the blue background and do Control Copy. I'm going to go after that text box and hit return, and then Control V to paste it in. I'm going to select it again, and I'm going to click on intense quote in my styles pane, and there I've copied that same style of box that is on the text layer of the document. And what I'll do is click on the very fine border of the floating text box and hit my delete key. So I've eliminated one problem here in my syllabus with the floating object. Down here where it's red text, that's important again. I could add another asterisk and make sure it's the same color as the font. And then that will help somebody with a screen reader know that that's an important sentence that they have to pay attention to. I could write, like if I didn't want to do an asterisk, sometimes people will write important and a colon, and then that will cue somebody in when they're listening to this. This light blue text I can tell is a problem. I mean, the accessibility checker picked it up. So I'm gonna launch Color Contrast Analyzer, which was down in my taskbar at the bottom. And I'm gonna take this little eyedropper tool, the top one, and click on my font color. And you can always zoom in, like if your hands aren't that steady. And then you could use your second eyedropper down here to sample your background color. And if I look at the lower right, I can see the contrast ratio on this is 1.7 to 1, and that it fails the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines for regular font, which just says it's a 12-point font. So I'm going to go back up to the top to my slider and set it to hue, saturation, and lightness. I'm going to drag the lightness slider down until I just see a little green check mark come in for regular text at the bottom right here. I can see that it passes, and the contrast ratio is now 4.8 to 1. For regular text, it needs to be 4.5 to 1, according to the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, level AA. So I could change over to red, green, blue values right now with this RGB button and jot down the values for RGB, 0, 117, and 204. And then I'm going to minimize Color Contrast Analyzer with my text still selected over here in Word. Go to the Home ribbon, go to where I designate my font color and say, choose more colors. And then I can type in those values that Color Contrast Analyzer gave me. And click OK. And now I've fixed my contrast issue with my text on my background. Okay, so next I'm going to go down to our discussion rubric table that I said is problematic because it has merged cells right here in this dual level of headers. So I need to delete this top row of cells. So I right click on it and choose delete cells and then delete entire row and click OK. So now I have to go back and type in that one header for this column. And I'm going to clear the styling on that text with this eraser icon in the home ribbon. And then what I'm going to do is find my strong style in my styles pane. There it is. And check on it. If for some reason you don't like the font face in that, you can right click and modify it, and you could set it deliberately to be whatever font face and weight that you need it to be and color. And so those are consistent. And then now I'm going to right click in the top row, go to table properties, go to the row tab, and check off repeat as header row at the top of each page to make sure a screen reader recognizes it as headings. And then go to table design. Go to table design up here. And then check off header row and first column as headers. I don't need banded, but it's important because I do actually have a column that could serve as a header to describe the cells to the right of it. Okay, so the last thing I want to teach you before I go is File, Info, Properties, Advanced Properties, and I'll set a document title here. It could be more descriptive than this, but if you set your title under the summary tag, when you convert this document to HTML or PDF, the title will go with it as a proper title. And that's it for my session. I think I covered what I wanted to cover for you guys. And I'm wondering, let me see if I can bring up question and answers here, or
There's a bunch of good questions in the
Sure.
chat if you
Okay.
wanted
All
to
right.
check those out.
Yeah, let me see if I can bring up the chat because I keep clicking on it, but I don't see it floating any. There it is. Okay. Okay, so let me see what I got here. Okay, so I see if we shouldn't use bold, italics, or underlining for emphasis, what should we use? I would say if it's in the body of the text, use the strong style. There's also something called emphasis in the styles pane, which would be a good substitute for anything that's italicized. And then I talked about, like, if you have color-coded text, like people use red to denote importance, using that asterisk right before the text to tell a screen reader that that's something important that follows that. There's also text that you can type important and then colon before the sentence to designate that it's important. Okay, is it possible to share the presentation slides? Yes, I did tweak them slightly so I can update that in the shared drive, Google Share, for the conference hosts. And I don't know how to get them out, but maybe they could share a folder with the attendees. Okay.
We'll be sharing everything that's shared with us and any videos that we have after the presentations, probably tomorrow or next week.
Okay. Okay, can you save customized styles to use across multiple documents? That's a good question. Yeah, if you go to the styles pane down here, I believe it's this little A with the green check mark. Let me open that up. And there's a radio button at the bottom of this dialog for manage styles that says new documents based on this template. If I check that off and then I create a new Word document, it should use these styles. Okay, so I lost my chat window again. Bear with me. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, let's see. I'm wondering if faculty, instructors, administrative assistants, or instructional designers are expected to modify documents for accessibility. It really depends on your institution and your job role. I have done some of it. I try to teach it to as many people as possible because it's such an enormous task and there's so much content to format for accessibility. So we do have training for it at our institution, and I would encourage training on it at every institution. Red font, colorblind. Yes, if you have red green color blindness, I've seen that they can experience it as a yellowish gray. So you don't want to use red font, but you can use it for sighted people, just as long as you do some other styling with it that speaks to people who are red green colorblind or speaks to somebody who's blind and using a screen reader. So I talked about using the asterisk before important things and also the word important colon and then followed by whatever sentence is important. Oh, okay, thank you. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, if you guys have more questions, let me bring up the PowerPoint slide with my email on it. I also have some references, like I've been putting my word accessibility training course into a book, a press book called Best Practices for Accessible Online Design at CSU, and I put the URL here. But there's also some great websites that you should check out on accessibility. WebAIM, University of Washington, the Diagram Center if you're working with a lot of charts and diagrams, and at the bottom is my email address, h.caprette@csuohio.edu. So if there's no more questions, I just want to say thank you all for sticking with me and attending and for caring about accessibility and for caring about other people.
Thank you very much, Heather. It's such valuable information that you can't just get enough of, and to master something like Word and then how that rolls into transitioning to PDF and to making things more accessible for our students.
It's broad. It's a very broad topic, accessibility. Like we could give a million of these sessions on different programs like PDFs and web accessibility. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I did share the next session's links, and I'm going to do it again. And don't forget to contribute to the Google Slides, your biggest takeaways for today, and we'll be presenting those in the final session at the end. So thank you, Heather, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day.